ministers have hinted the government could be pressing ahead with bold new pledges on housing and taxes as Rishi Sunak struggles to narrow the popularity gap with Labour.
It comes after the Treasury announced that next year's budget will be on March 6th, leading to more speculation of an election being called soon after. Speaking to Talk Today earlier, the Shadow Attorney General Emily Thornberry said it's time to get a government that will actually get things done.
They keep announcing that they're going to do things, but they never have a strategy as to how they're going to do it. So what they do is they say, oh, we're going to do this, and nothing happens, Nothing happens. And so what they don't have is they don't have the backfill on how does this policy work and how is it going to be put together. And that is why we are doing this work in opposition, so that when we have a manifesto promise, we will have behind it a proper strategy as to how we will deliver it and how it will be paid for. That will be the difference. A government that actually wants to govern and a government that's given up.
Joining us now is talkTV's political correspondent Alicia Fitzgerald, the political commentator Benedict Spence. Alicia, surprised by the timing and surprised by Emily Thornberry there?
Maybe the latter a little bit more so. She was having a good laugh, wasn't she? She's very cheerful for this early in the morning. And cold.
She wasn't. She had a right go at JJ.
I did see that. I saw that. Yeah, I know. Timing-wise for the budget, obviously lots of speculation about this. It is a tiny bit earlier than normal. This year's was on the 15th of March, for example, and this one is going to be on the 6th. Not a massive difference, obviously, it's only a week or so. Lots of people saying this maybe means that the government are getting ready for a May election. Obviously, we can't just go on the date of the budget to assume when the election will be. Only the people in number 10 know exactly when the election is going to be, but it does maybe hint a little bit that they are definitely gearing up and ready to go.
Although it was interesting, Benedict, when Emily Thornberry wasn't having a go at JJ, she did say, well, the timing of the budget on March the 6th reveals the worst kept secret in Westminster. The election is definitely going to be in May. That's why we, the Labour Party, are pushing forward our manifesto to bring it out, to get it ready in February. Do you buy that, or is that just convenient for the Labour Party?
I'm not convinced, actually, that it is necessarily going to be early. I think why you're going to start hearing policies being released now is because they want to judge what the response is going to be to them. But the thing is, as we all know, the government's polling is appalling at the moment. Does May, sort of an early summer election, actually give them enough time to bring those numbers back up? Or will they actually need longer to sort of for people to see the fruits of the Labour, if you like, coming forward? I mean, we're talking right now about...
Fruits of Labour.
Yeah.
Very good, Benedict.
Thank you. I was hoping. But the thing is, on most general elections are going to be fought on whether or not people feel wealthier at the end than they do at the beginning of a parliament. It's quite clear that people don't feel that. So what they'll be going on right now, if it's about tax cuts, is the hope that they will feel wealthier, because they won't see the end result of that for quite some time. If it doesn't cut through, if things like tax cuts don't through, then it is going to be on things like small boats. And right now, actually, the government have not been able to put together a viable plan in order to reduce the numbers. Now, numbers have come down, but perhaps not for the reasons that the government might quite have liked. Therefore, you might see them pushing it back a little bit longer, thinking, well, let's give ourselves another summer to try to get those numbers down even further, so that we can actually go to the public in, say, November or December and say, look, we promised to get these numbers down, and we did. Because right now, all they've got is promises, basically, to sell to people.
Actually, Benedict, it's interesting that you bring up small boats. There's a tiny little piece buried deep in one of the papers today about small boat numbers over the last couple of weeks, which have been pretty much zero. Now, we've had high winds, the weather, but compared to this time last year, they are way down. It might just be a blip. But as Benedict says, things like that, Downing Street is going to be collating all these numbers and saying, when can we give ourselves the best possible chance of some good news?
Well, absolutely. I mean, a win is a win for the Conservative Party and the government at the moment. Any hint that any of the 5 pledges or just any of their goals as a government have even slightly been met is going to be a really big bonus for them. And they're really going to try and capitalise on that and make sure that everyone is more than aware that this has happened, whether or not it is down to measures they've put in place or whether or not it is down to external factors. That one will probably be scrutinised as we hear a bit more about it, but unlikely it's due to the Rwanda scheme, though, given that no one has actually gone to Rwanda. So.
Yeah. Benedict, when I suggested to Emily Thornberry that there wasn't enough of a gap between Labour and the Tories and they're basically just Tory light, she didn't like that, let's say. But do you think with the new manifesto coming up that they can make a push for people to say, oh, this is the Labour Party?
It's difficult to know because the Labour Party hasn't actually been put under any real pressure. All of the pressure has been on the Conservatives, justifiably so, they are the government. But I don't think you could say that anything that Labour has put forward so far or hinted at has been stress tested, so to speak. And actually what I think, the main thing that's being talked about today is the cut to inheritance tax. That does drive a line between Labour and the Conservatives, and it's very much in the Conservatives' favour. Nobody actually wants well, very few people actually like the idea of inheritance tax. And the thing that the Tories understand is, as much as people say, oh, well, it only affects 3 to 5% of the population, that's not going to be true much longer, given that a quarter of pensioners now live in households worth over £1 million. Very soon, actually, it's going to affect a lot more people. And when we sort of talk about intergenerational wealth disparities, older people are going to be looking at that and thinking, am I actually going to vote for Labour, or am I going to vote for a policy that will mean that actually my grandchildren get to keep a little bit more money to allow themselves to get on the housing ladder? So this is the starting gun, if you like, and it's actually the Tories that have drawn the first blood. So far, we've heard Labour talking about, Wes Streeting, he's been off around the world to Australia, Singapore, saying the NHS isn't the envy of the world. It's not great. We're going to maybe tinker around the edges, do this and that and the other. But you haven't actually heard much beyond at the last party conferences when Keir Starmer was talking about this new British energy company that he was going to set up, and we haven't really heard very much since then. Actually, it's been a bit quiet. It's simply been a question of, well, we're not the Tories. And thus far, I haven't really heard enough from Labour to suggest to me that they're going to make a massive play to say we're different from them. It's simply up to now, we are not the government, and therefore we'll do better.
Which is still quite a powerful message when the government is ripping itself to shreds, saying we're not the government, still has some potency. But of course, we are beginning to see a bit of flesh on the bones. Stories today. The Labour Party has been talking for some time about that it wants to make childcare one of its central policies at the general election. But we're seeing a bit of detail today about what that means. Is that the kind of policy that lands?
Well, this is it. So this is a policy that's definitely aimed at working people. Childcare obviously has a massive impact, not just on the children, but on the parents of children. If there's two parents going to work, who looks after the child? We've got a massive void of childcare spaces. And not just that, partly because of the supply and demand issue, but also because of general inflation. Childcare costs have absolutely rocketed. It is pretty much unaffordable for the majority of people. So Labour here are saying that what they do is expand on what the government promised. The government has so far allowed 30 hours, up to 30 hours of free childcare per week per family, per child, sorry. But Labour have said that doesn't quite go far enough. What they're proposing here is that they have nursery places built into primary schools so that children don't have to be shafted around from nursery to a new primary school. They kind of just continue into the primary school.
And you've got that building sitting empty. So,
exactly.
Before and after school, so it makes some sense.
And so many teachers who are in the profession and happy and want to be there. No. We're losing teachers.
I thought half of our schools were falling down because of the concrete.
Oh, good. That's a good point, to be honest.
It's
on 5-year-olds.
I think it's not about policy. This is something that does need to be addressed. But I would also argue that it's something that appeals to people who are probably already going to vote Labour, whereas a lot of people who would stand to benefit from a change to inheritance tax tend to fall within that category of people, a lot of whom are sort of swaying towards the Lib Dems in certain seats, might even be convinced by Labour. I think that it's more likely, the inheritance tax thing, to win votes than this, even though this is probably more important long term.
Exactly, which brings us down to that central issue. Do politicians go after cynical vote-winning policies or policies that will actually make a difference to the majority of people? We have run out of time, but we will leave that one dangling in the air. Alicia, food for thought, exactly. Thank you very much.